Welcome back to Soul Ramble Mode. So I think it seems I need to clarify a couple of things here. So if that's something you're not interested in, go ahead and skip ahead like maybe 2 minutes. I'll probably put a timer or just somewhere to skip to on screen or whatever. I'm sure Editor Soul's working on it. But two things. One, we have a schedule now. Every Wednesday, we're going to have our regularly scheduled scripted videos, and then on Thursdays and Fridays, we are going to have Soul Ramble modes, just so that we can keep content consistent and so that we are, constantly active on the channel. And then other days are either going to be filled with shorts or potentially live streams if I have the availability to do so. Okay. Secondly, I'm going to have to do this every video. It's got to be obligatory because people, will forget sometimes, and that's okay. But if you are enjoying the content that I've been putting out so far or lately, make sure to drop a like, a comment, maybe consider subscribing and hyping the video, because doing that stuff helps the channel immensely. I would definitely like to try and reach 11K before February, so that way we could start setting up for our official Pokemon Winds and Waves giveaway, so that by the time, Winds and Waves does come out, depending on what things are looking like, we could give away a good couple of copies. And I want to be able to do that for you guys. I want to make sure to give back to you. So if you guys could do me those favors, help the channel out a little bit, I would definitely appreciate it, and I would definitely do my best to give back to you guys. Thank you again, okay, for all the support you guys have been giving me on the last couple of videos. It's been immaculate couple of weeks here, and I want to keep that train going as much as I can. So I would appreciate all the assistance we can get out here. Okay, all right, now everything is laid out. Okay, now recently there has been a little bit of a debacle going on, specifically in the Twitter space, specifically in the Pokemon space. Well-known leaker page, Central Leaks, has given their general opinion on how they feel in regards to the remakes of Pokemon games, right? Because here's our thing. We have been basically anticipating, the next set of remakes to be 5th gen remakes to likely come out after this generation of Pokemon. So we're probably surmising that we would get Pokemon Winds and Waves late 2027, and then the DLC for it would probably come out sometime in 2028 to, fill the void for Pokemon related content. Maybe it would be a two-parter, just like we had in Sword and Shield and Scarlet and Violet, and then we would get our extra content that way, and then the following year, 2029, we'd probably end up receiving the remakes for Generation 5. Because that's basically how the pattern has been pretty much forever since we've known the series. Every new major console generation, every new Nintendo era, we would get a remake from that generation, from, that era of Nintendo, you know what I'm saying? So as of right now, we're hitting Generation 10, it only makes sense that we go back and we hit the Gen 5 remakes after this, right? So that's just how it's always been. Just look at the patterns, it's always been there. But Central claims that the remakes as we know them are done. Let me pull up the tweet really quick, actually. Remakes as we knew them for main series Pokemon games are over. It's time to accept it. Pokemon BDSP wasn't supposed to exist. Game Freak originally wanted to make Legends Arceus to celebrate Sinnoh, but they were worried people wouldn't accept the different style of Legends games. So they commissioned a remake very late in development just in case. We all know the disaster that was. And on the other hand, Legends Arceus was received very well. Game Freak now will revisit old regions in unique ways and not necessarily in order anymore. And I'm not reading the rest of that because that is stuff we will talk about in a future dedicated video and stuff like that. But essentially what they're saying is that because of the way that they've been doing things lately, they believe that it's safe to say that remakes in the traditional sense are done because of how we've received a couple of things in the past, right? In recent years. And I'm not sure about any of that, right? Now, here's the thing. I barely, Central is hit or miss with a lot of these things, most of the time it's mostly like, it's all stolen stuff regardless. So it's just kind of like, I take everything that Central says with a grain of salt, and I recommend that you guys do too. Most people, to my understanding, don't really seem to believe that at all, but I think it's still a very interesting talking point because, there's points to be made here, even though, we don't necessarily agree with them, or at least I certainly don't. But it's very interesting, right? So let's talk about it, right? Let's break it down a little bit here, right? So First things first, they claimed that Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl wasn't actually ever supposed to be made, and that it was basically like a hasty like safety net because they didn't think that Pokemon Legends was going to hit like it did. They basically were just nervous about Pokemon Legends being what it was and selling that by itself. So they wanted to play it safe, and they hired Ilka like last minute to just be like, hey, like just make 3D versions of Pokemon Diamond and Pearl and let's just call it a day. You know what I'm saying? Like let's just get that to them as fast as humanly possible. And they did precisely that. And you know, a lot of people have been telling me recently after my one of my more recent videos, people were telling me like, yeah, no, the Legends video, or that room that's kind of like hidden off, like off screen or whatever in Pokemon Legends, that room actually is supposed to be an part of an intro cutscene to Pokemon Legends. Like that was a room, you know, our player character was supposed to be yanked out of. That actually wasn't signifying the remakes, which, okay, cool. I'm glad to be wrong about. That's okay. You know, so if that's how it is, that's how it is. But that does mean that, yeah, like Legends was always meant to be its own thing. They came up with the concept and then they were nervous about it because they had never done something like this before and were scared that people wouldn't, you know, take it well because, you know, Pokemon fans, especially back in the day, definitely don't have a pretty bad track record of like taking things well whenever they would introduce newer concepts, right? It was very, very hit or miss. Especially back in the day. So they were nervous about, you know, going in such a different direction with Legends. And that makes sense, right? So fine. Like, you know, the Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, those remakes were just kind of let's make this just in case. Like, let's make our little safety net just so that if Legends doesn't hit, at least people have their remakes and they have their revisit to Gen 4 in the proper way that they were expecting, right? Which, you know, in hindsight, I'm okay. That's the thing. Like, most people would have been okay with both. Like, the thing is that they don't understand probably is that they could have easily made it so that we had one or the other early on, and then we would have had the other one later that following year, as opposed to Scarlet and Violet, and then we could have pushed production back on Scarlet and Violet to make that way, way better, so that when that released, that would have been phenomenal. But instead, they decided to rush out development and make sure to have that ready within the same, you know, time frame, because we got Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl in November of 21, and then we got Legends Arceus at the beginning of 22. So they wanted to have, you know, they wanted to make sure something Pokemon related was successful within that time frame, so that the holiday season was just, you know, as good as they could possibly make it. And they probably did not expect to double everything that they just did not expect Legends to do as well as it did. So, you know, it makes sense. But, you know, what Centro is claiming here is that Legends, you know, was supposed to be the only thing, and we were never actually going to receive Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. Which, you know, it's kind of, I don't know how I feel about that as an idea. I don't think that they would just completely abandon the concept of remakes, especially because, like, that's such an, of all the things that they could do, especially to appeal to the older Pokemon fans, remakes are probably the easiest win that they can do. And it's a good, like, that's a good, like, space saver for, like, major release windows and stuff, right? Like, we need something, if Nintendo needed something huge for, like, the holiday season or whatever, if they dropped, like, you know, the Gen 5 remakes, let's say, you know, we had no knowledge of, like, Winds and Waves, if they were to drop the Gen 5 remakes at the end of this year or something like that, people would be fine with that, especially if they looked good. I think obviously, like, the primary situation here is that they don't fully believe that, you know, remakes are worth making anymore. And that's stupid because, you know, these games are far enough away to the point where they're not accessible like that anymore. They're not easy to reach. And so the whole point of remakes is to make these older generations of Pokemon as accessible to new players as much as humanly possible. And that's probably the easiest one they can get, because they appeal to not only older players, but they're still giving a newer experience to newer fans that have gotten into the series through, like, you know, the Switch era or, like, you know, home console era within recent years. That's just like win-win for everybody. Again, as long as the games themselves are good. Obviously, Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl are not a great example because those were rushed out the ass just to get to us, right? There was no reason for it to happen the way it did. They underestimated, how much we would like Pokemon Legends, but all that did was just hurt the production of, the remakes, because they rushed them out. And, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, and that really, really sucks. But that's where that is, right? But the other problem is some of their other claims, right? I'm not going to talk too much going, past like what we know for like Legends EA and stuff like that. But for example, right, they claimed that the closest thing we were going to get to a revisit for Generation 5 was the DLC for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet in Blueberry Academy, in which Blueberry Academy is placed within the waters of Unova. So technically we are in Unova in the, in the Scarlet and Violet DLC in Indigo Disc. No, that's not a revisit. We didn't see any familiar characters. We saw familiar Pokemon, obviously, and we saw references to Generation 5, which is cool. We got like the reference to Chargestone Cave and stuff like that, and then we got a lot of Gen 5 Pokemon with Joltik and everybody in there. So it's just like, that was them kind of playing into, yeah, we're in Unova, so obviously Unova-related Pokemon are going to be present within the waters, or within the school here, within the giant dome within the school. And that's a neat little thing that they did, but I don't think that was meant to be like, yep, that's your revisit to Generation 5. What? Hell no, they're not gonna just drop that on us and call it a day. Like, I know that they can, this is Pokemon we're talking about, right? I know that they can be cheap. I know that they can be kind of, a problem when it comes to, that kind of thing. But I'm not gonna sit here and believe that our revisit, and that's something that they were okay with giving to us as a revisit, was just the Blueberry Academy DLC for Scarlet and Violet. There's no way in hell that's all we got, right? The way that they hinted at certain things, it implies that, the teacher for Blueberry Academy, she was gonna take back all of her knowledge to, Prime Unova and stuff like that. Obviously, what she was referring to primarily was the school and stuff like that, but, I can't put it past them to maybe, do some more stuff with that, right? I'm sure that they definitely learned their lesson when it comes to Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. Like, yes, like, we still want remakes, we just don't want them to be so similar to the point where, the third version, something like Pokemon Platinum, is still the most optimal way to play Generation 4. Like, that is the best way to play Generation 4. It's still not Diamond and Pearl, or Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, right? That was the problem. Obviously, there's a good chance that they also could have taken mixed messages from that, but I think that they have a clear enough idea of what we would like to see by now with that, right? I really don't think that that's the case. I fully don't believe that, right? And then in a similar vein, they claim that, they're going out of order now, and that Legends EA was our revisit to Generation 6. Nah. I guess that one is a more viable argument, considering the fact that this one was actually revisit. We were actually within Kalos at the very least, even if we were in one setting. Like, we did revisit Kalos, we did have access to Mega Evolution, and we got, new Mega Evolutions and stuff like that, and we got characters, and we got to continue their stories, which honestly is phenomenal in of itself. Like, I love that we did that. I love, that we did that for Legends EA, but the idea that this was going to completely just eradicate and replace our revisit to a full, Kalos revisit seems, I don't know. Again, that's at least a more viable argument than what we had with the Blueberry Academy situation. That I don't believe in the slightest. Like, that just makes zero sense to me, right? But I don't know. You could definitely make an argument for what Legends EA represents, right? But even then, like, I still don't see a situation in which we just don't get anything else going forward in terms of remakes. Like, this just seems like kind of an absurd claim that just doesn't mesh well. And most people seem to agree. I see from the majority of responses that I've seen in regards to this post, most people seem to be in agreement that we're probably not going to just completely abandon the concept of remakes. Again, especially because they are phenomenal placeholders. They themselves could be monstrous sellers for Nintendo, for Pokemon, for the holiday season every year. Like, they're perfect placeholders, and you can get away with, you know, a lot doing that, right? If they were to pull what they did with BDSP, realistically, yeah, people would be pissed, but hey, you know what? It's still gonna sell, because let's be realistic. It's Pokemon here. People are gonna buy into Pokemon, and there's a lot of people out there, especially a lot of newcomers, that are totally fine with the concept of these remakes being very, very close to their original counterparts, because they have not played these generations before. A lot of the friends I know that have Switches, that have, you know, been playing Pokemon for a long time now, for the last like 10 years, for the last decade, they haven't played, you know, they didn't play Generation 4, they didn't play Generation 5. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, getting the opportunity to play, you know, the most accessible version of Generation 4, they were perfectly content with Generation 4, or with the remakes for Generation 4. Obviously, longtime fans weren't, because it was too close, it was too similar, and it didn't make enough difference to justify buying for us. But, you know, sensibly, it was more for the newer audience than it ever was for us, which sucks to admit. But, you know, it sucks to look at it that way, but that is the truth. It wasn't as for us as they tried to advertise. They did lie to us a little bit, and it hurts, it stings, it sucks, but the reality of it is that they wanted to make it accessible to people no matter what. And them skimping out on a free win with Generation 5 remakes seems absurd to me. And, you know, going forward too, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's definitely I mean, there's definitely less of a cost to be worried about when you don't have to worry about, you know, a story that's already presented within a game. You could just basically copy and paste a story, and, you know, the general aesthetics and stuff like that, right? Like, you already have the blueprint. They already have the blueprint. All they have to do is build it in a new image, right? Obviously, that's still costly, but it's still doable. It's still feasible, and it still makes sense to do. Which is why, you know, I can't imagine that, yeah, from now on, instead of like having you know, the perfect lineup of like new generation, legends, remakes, you know, just having that perfect, you know, back-to-back of games, they just don't do remakes anymore. Like, now it's just, yep, generation, DLC, Legends title. Like, there's no way. Like, you're not convincing me that's what they're doing. If they are, that's pure insanity. Hi, Future Soul butting in really quick to just interrupt past me, who completely forgot to mention that one of the primary reasons a lot of people might believe this situation in particular is because of the primary like leaks that we got a couple of years back, or just last year, whenever we got our major leaks that pretty much led us into all of the major projects leading into at least 2032. But here's the thing, they can still change plans. Like, why are we you know what I'm saying? Like, literally, we have to remember that Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl in of itself was a changed plan. Like, what's to stop them from changing plans and still developing the remakes? And, you know, again, with the blueprints there, not that I would want them to, obviously, but I could definitely see one of the teams managing to get that done well before the end of 2029. You know what I'm saying? Like, I wouldn't be shocked if that still managed to exist, even if we know, quote unquote, the plans. Like, you know, you don't think that they're fully aware that we are fully like aware of what's going on with their plans, to the point where they would, you know, make some internal changes here and there, swap some things around. We were supposed to get Pokemon Legends in 2024, but they delayed plans, and we ended up getting them at the end of 2025. You know what I'm saying? Like, plans can still change, and they can still very much, like, maybe they don't give us the remakes within the next like couple of years. Okay, fine. I don't think that they're completely eradicated as a possibility for, you know, major releases. I don't think that they're just gonna get rid of that. So that's where my head is at with that. I almost forgot to put this in there, but okay, Past Soul, it's on you. I know a lot of people are definitely looking at me with, you know, wide eyes right now, or like raised eyebrows right now, because I did just make a video recently talking about the fact that, you know, remakes are boring, right? And I still stick true to that. But the primary reason that I feel that way is because, or at the very least, especially about Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, is because, you know, they didn't try to bring too many new elements to the table. At least not like, you know, what previous generations did, right? But like, my problem is that usually, you know, they don't go out of their way to fix the story. They don't go out of the way to, you know, add as many new elements or new, you know, available Pokemon and stuff like that. Or at least, you know, Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl didn't. You know, obviously Generation 1, 2, and 3's remakes did most of that, but you know, with Generation 4, what I'm scared of is that, you know, they saw the success money-wise with Generation 4, and they felt like they could probably get away with doing something like that. And that is why, overall, I would just prefer that we did have Legends games, and I'm totally cool with that. If they were to get rid of remakes, like, all right, if that's your prerogative, then fine. But I feel like that's just such an easy win that they wouldn't just cop out of. Like, why would they abandon that concept when that's just such easy money? Like, that's such a perfect placeholder while they're building up on the next Legends title or the next major generation or the DLCs or whatever for the next major Pokemon game that's supposed to come afterwards. It just doesn't make sense that they would do something like that. Again, I will always prefer Legends titles over remakes, but if we did get remakes, at the very least, I would want them to just change a couple of elements, mix and match the Pokemon that are available within this game to make it, a lot more interesting. So I'm not utilizing the exact same team, or I don't end up with the exact same team that I used when I first played through this game. Make it so that there's new events, new elements, maybe some new characters to toss in there, kind of like what you did with the Delta episode in the Gen 3 remakes. You know what I'm saying? Like, do more stuff like that to make the experience a little bit more interesting, as opposed to just newer, prettier visuals. If even that, you know what I'm saying? First things first, make sure that the visuals are way better and way more enjoyable. And then on top of that, they add some new elements to make the game worth, buying into. So, I still stand by what I said. I still think that remakes in general are a boring concept, but I don't think I want them to die. I just think I want them to do better with them, instead of just having, Legends completely replace it, because that just seems like a waste. You know what I'm saying? Especially because, again, like I just said earlier, these games are on dead consoles. They're on dead or dying consoles. They're not really easily accessible, and people shouldn't have to pay an arm and a leg to get their hands on older games if they wanted to get more into the franchise. So making it more easily accessible for the common person just makes more sense. And I can't imagine a situation in which they would just skip out on doing that. I don't know. It just seems like a ridiculous concept to me. But I could be in the wrong. I'm sure there's plenty of you guys out there that are going to disagree with me, or maybe disagree with Central. Who knows? I'm sure a lot of you guys are going to have words as soon as this video goes up. So that being said, I've said my piece, and I'm passing the mic over in your direction. Tell me everything you guys are thinking in the comment section below. Do you agree that, like remakes, this claim from Central doesn't really make a lot of sense? It's probably not going to be the case that remakes in of themselves are going to be dead. It's just like a crazy claim, just based on, a couple of patterns here and there, and that we'll probably still see remakes in one way or another. Or are you on the opposing side? You think remakes are completely cooked, we're not going to see them again, and from now on, it's just going to be the generational titles, Legends, and maybe some other third thing. I pray to Shinx it's not Let's Go. I'm not kidding about that either. Tell me everything that you guys are thinking in the comment section below, because you know for a fact that I'm always going to be down there with you guys. But with that, it does appear to be skedaddle o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and do just that. I'd like to thank you guys ever so much for watching. I truly do hope you enjoyed. Do me the greatest favor of dropping a like and a comment, and consider subscribing for more content just like this here. And with that, I'm gone. So thanks again, hope you enjoyed, and I'll be seeing you guys in the next video. Do me the greatest favor of taking good ass care, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!